Alright, so comparable. Comparable is a built-in interface in Java that is readily accessible for you to use with the classes and objects that you create. Actually, a significant number of the classes and objects that are built into Java actually implement comparable. Things like string, integer, double. Some of the other ones would be big integer, big decimal. There are a wide variety of others that are not coming to mind right now as of this moment. Point is another one, point 2D, etc., etc., etc. Comparable is designed to make a simple common interface for comparing two objects' characteristics in Java. Conventionally speaking, comparable is used very heavily with things like sorting values, putting things in order like the alphabet, numbers, what have you. Sorting is one of those things that is, well, can be fairly CPU intensive, and making things easier and making things as simple as possible and as efficient as possible is always something that a good programmer is looking out for, and comparable helps us do that. So let's talk a little bit about how you would structure a class if you wanted to use comparable. Now right here I've created a class called WeightedItem. It's just a generic item that has a particular weight. And in this case we say implements comparable, and then you notice that comparable is actually a templated item. It has to have a type to work with in order for it to work correctly. It will work if you don't put this, but I really strongly don't recommend it, because it will add a lot more headache for when you're trying to actually do the work for the assignment this week, and for the assignments if you ever have to use comparable in the future. For this class, because templates is more of an advanced topic, and I'm not really going to cover why comparable is templated. For this class, you shouldn't have any reason to put anything else in the less than and greater than signs other than the name of the class that you want to make comparable. So it should always be the same thing as your class name. WeightedItem should have WeightedItem in it. If you were going to do myInteger, then it should have myInteger in it, etc., etc., etc. But that being said, we have an instance variable. In this case, it's called weight. It's a double. We have our constructor, which gives us a new weight. We have a getWeight and setWeight method, as we should. And we have a toString method. All fairly straightforward. We covered this in the previous class. This shouldn't really be new to you. But then we have this larger method here. This is called compareTo. compareTo is actually something that comes from comparable. And you see that compareTo returns an integer and has a parameter that is the same type as whatever it is that you are creating a comparable class for. In this case, it's WeightedItem. And I call the name of that parameter otherItem. Okay? You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. Java doesn't care as long as there's a name there. Personally, I would like to see you use camel case. Please make sure that you are trying to use proper formatting and making things look nice. You will start to get dinged as harder and harder for this sort of thing as we get moving along, because if you come to me with a robot code question during robotics season and your code looks like you mashed it together in 5 minutes, I'm not going to take the time. I need to have, and many other programmers need to have, clean code if you want us to inspect and understand and be able to follow what it is you're trying and doing. And of course, during these examples I don't have comments, but obviously you are expected to have comments in your examples. It makes my life easier. It makes other people reading your code's life easier. It's one of those things where it is courtesy and it is also graded. My fan keeps trying to blow away my notes. Compare to, its intention is to make a common mechanism between objects of the same or similar types, and be able to make a deterministic evaluation of whether or not the two objects are equal to each other, one is greater than the other, or one is less than the other. In this case, what happens is, if the objects are equal, then the value returned is 0. And in this case, we are comparing the weight of the object that compare to was called on with the weight of the other item. Okay? If the weight of the current object that compare to was called on is greater than the other item, then we return 1. Otherwise, if the weight of the current object that compare to was called on is less than the other item, then we return -1. And you don't necessarily have to return 1 and -1. The compare to specification just says that if the value is greater, then it should return a value greater than 0, and if the value is lesser, it should return a value less than 0. Normally you'll see them return 0, 1, and -1, but don't make that assumption. It is always better to use proper formatting to make sure that everything is ship-shape. So let's see this used. Let's create 2 weighted items. Weighted item, item 1 is equal to new weighted item, and then we'll say 45. Okay, and then we'll say weighted item, item 2 is equal to new weighted item, and then we'll say 45. And then what we'll do is we'll create a new int that says compared result, and we'll say item 1 dot compare to item 2. And then we'll say if compared result is equal to 0, then we will system.out.println the values are equal. This is going to take me a second to get all the way through here. Then we'll say else if compared result is greater than 0, then system.out.println the value of item 1 is greater than item 2. So I'm already running out of space again. Let me expand my window a little bit. There we go. It's better. And then else system.out.println the value of item 1 is less than item 2. Okay, so if we run this, the obvious result that we should get is, where's my console window? The values are equal. There we go. So if I change item 1's value to be 50, let's say, then what we should see happen is this compared result should run. So if we compile and we run, the value of item 1 is greater than item 2, and obviously that is true. And then, of course, if we made item 1, let's say, 40, then we could compile and run it, and it should tell us the value of item 1 is less than item 2. So this is the general idea behind comparable. You pick a characteristic, or maybe a set of characteristics if you have enough of them, that are related to each other, and you compare them and you return a result that is either equal to, greater than, or less than, based on how compare to is defined in the comparable interface. You will actually be using comparable in this week's assignment. You will be setting up a mechanism for comparing the bouncy balls that you created in the previous week. So what we are going to do is I'm going to pause this video. This is actually taking less time than I thought it would. I'm actually going to be done by about 4 o'clock, I suspect. Probably a little bit earlier, maybe 3:45. So I can get these uploaded a little bit earlier today, which is going to take probably an hour and a half, 2 hours to do. But that being said, we're going to talk about your assignment and what I expect you to do, and then we will be only one class left for this book, for this class. One more chapter, and then after that, I need to finish writing up the documentation and curriculum for the second book, the second class, book 1, so we can start talking about some robot stuff, which will follow the same format as this book, as this class did in the near future.